Coming up next, Marvelous Miss Maisel, Season 2, Episode 3, The Punishment Room. Go and brush your shoulders off. Go and brush your shoulders off. Hello, welcome to this installment of the Marvelous Miss Maisel Season 2 review, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about Episode 3, The Punishment Room. It received a score of IMDb of 8.4, and it got its highest score among the demographic of women over the age of 45, a score of 9.1, and its lowest average score in the demographic of men between the ages of 30 and 44, 8.1. So a 1 point difference between the high and the low. And this time I noticed that the men 45 and over, their score was 8.2. So again, that it's really weak. The show seems to be really weak. 45 and over with men, and in this episode, men 30 to 44. I have to admit, this was probably my least favorite episode of the season so far, but since it's only 3 episodes in, it's not saying a lot. Director of this episode was Scott Ellis. He's also worked on the shows The Modern Family and Weeds. And the writer was Daniel Palladino, the husband of the showrunner Amy Sherman Palladino, the showrunner. And the director of photography was Eric Moynier, also has worked on The Blacklist and Boardwalk Empire. And first my brief thoughts about the episode. Like I said, it was it was my least favorite episode, I thought, of the season so far. I thought the stand-up comedy bits weren't really sharp. Also, I felt that Midge was not written as in character. The writing of Midge was a little sloppy in this episode. Plot summary of Episode 3 comes courtesy of Amazon Prime. Midge puts her impeccable planning to the test as she helps Mary with her special day. Joel's attempts to keep finances steady at Maisel and Roth end up on a treasure hunt. Midge's act flourishes, but Susie's finances take a hit. Back at Columbia, Rose finds herself out of her comfort zone when auditing classes. And let's talk about the events of the plot for the episode. So beginning with the A-plot, which would be Midge, this is where I had my biggest problems with the episode. And I think my problems with the episode could have been solved by better coordination between the stand-up montage that happens earlier in the episode of Midge doing her routine, and it's intercut between 4 different skits, and her later routine, such as it is at the wedding reception. And I think there was a disconnect between the earlier montage and the actions at the wedding scene, and that's, I think, a missed opportunity on the part of the writer. Instead of just giving us random montage of Midge performing her skit, if instead we had seen, much like we had in Season 1, where we see her developing her tight 10, and we see the jokes fail and then get a little bit, we see the evolution of each joke, how it fails and then gets a tepid response and then a little better response. Instead, if the events of later in the episode where Midge becomes kind of too acerbic, too much Don Rickles, too much of a shock, relying too much on insult humor, if we had seen her get to that point where she discovered that her jokes were getting the bigger laughs when she insulted the audience. And so you see a joke where Midge delivers it and it gets a kind of tepid response. And then she notices something in the crowd and she improvises a line that gets a better response, and then you see her sharpening that insult into perfection, and see that over 3 or 4 jokes, where you can plainly see that Midge is learning that insulting the audience gets a better reaction. So then when we get to the wedding, we are going to anticipate that that's what Midge will do. And I think that would have played a lot better. I saw on Reddit, many of the commenters there felt it was a little out of character. It was just a little forced that she would, at that venue, she's not on stage, decide that insulting the people there, because it's not a comedy club, it's just a wedding reception, that it didn't seem characteristic of Midge to make that social faux pas, or that social misjudgment. If we had seeded that, though, if the writers had seeded that earlier in the episode and showed us where Midge gets to that point, that would have made a lot more sense. That scene would have played a lot better. Joel. I really like the stuff. Joel, I thought, Joel and Joel's family got the funniest bits in this episode. Well, I think tied with the Luigi's family. That was really funny. That's Susie. But the stuff with the treasure map and the scene in the bank where Kevin Pollak is saying this person is not Jew, they're not Jew, you're not a Jew. I thought those were just hilarious. And then the scene where Joel and his friend whose brother works at the bank, the friend comes to visit Joel and the mom suspects that they're homosexual and she opens the door just when Joel's putting a hand on the friend, and the mom acts like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you now. She caught them at something that they weren't really doing. That was just straight up slapstick humor. I really liked that. Liked that a lot. That was the funniest part of the show. Then, yeah, so my next mention is about the character of Susie, and the Italian family, straight out of stock characters. Just any Italian stereotype you could think of, where they're singing the Italian songs and they're very exuberant. It was funny. Sometimes you can take an old trope, and if you just do it well enough, it still works, and I thought that worked. And I thought, however, in that same episode, the business with the phone bill was really forced. We could see that it was there just to put Susie's character into a bind, up the stakes for the character, the tension. And I'm not a fan of all contrivance. If you've followed my reviews at all so far, you know that about me. And I thought that was a bit contrived. And then we get Abe and Rose, and for Abe and Rose, here, I'm just going to adjust the lighting. Yeah, there we go, it works. For Abe and Rose, their characters, they have that interesting evolution now of their marriage, where they're both growing. I like it a lot. And I thought there was one interesting bit in the episode with Rose that was foreshadowed the episode before, and that is her conversation with the undergrads, or they might be grad students if they're working for their masters, where she gets them disillusioned about their role within the university and what really will happen with them once they have their degree. That was foreshadowed the episode before, where she took a mentor role with a girl at the art gallery, and they begin talking about their personal lives, and she's giving advice about the personal life. So the way that Rose is kind of finding herself as a mentor to younger generation, that's being played out really well. I thought that the resolution of that conflict didn't work so well. Again, it was a little pat that Abe's just going to roll in and talk his way out of it, and that'll be the end of it. I thought that was just too easy. It was the easy way out. And I thought the writer could have been created a little more difficulty for the characters, but I understand this is what the C or D plot, you don't have that much room. You've got one or two scenes maybe for a D plot. Scene set it up and the scene to pay it off. Maybe 3. Set up, develop, pay off. The typical 3-beat humor. Set up, pay off. Set up, develop, pay off. So I get that. I mean, I get it. You do the best you can. I still want to point out the flaw, though, that the way this scene was resolved was very easy. And after the break, I want to talk a little bit about the cinematography of the episode and my thoughts about some of the deeper themes. So please join me in about 30 seconds. Welcome back. And now I want to mention two scenes where I really liked the cinematography. I thought the cinematography was worthy of talking about. First one was scene 9, and that's the scene where it begins with Abe talking to his students at the university, and then Abe realizes he needs to join Rose at the end of her art class. So he just continues his lesson as he's walking out of the room, and all the students dutifully follow along. And take a look at how the students are positioned. They get the most important characters just to the left and right of Abe, right behind his shoulders, so they're in the frame and you can see them. And then everyone is positioned perfectly so that you can get enough of their faces in the back, and positioned well enough to fill up that hallway too, to make it look like a real crowd. And that takes a lot of work, or at least a lot of thought. And it's the kind of thing you won't notice when it works well. And I thought, because many people probably didn't notice it, I wanted to point it out. And then the second one was in scene 19. So this is where cinematography and editing do a lot with space, because we need to feel that Joel is going to get lost in his family's, not quite a warehouse, factory. So between the way that the camera's positioned and the editing between different settings, we need to have the impression this place is really vast. And when editing and cinematography worked well, it's like magic, because you can take shots that occurred in different times, in different spaces, and if the costuming and the lighting and the editing work well enough, it will obscure all that. I just watched a documentary about Orson Welles and the making of The Other Side of the Wind. How he, in his later years, because funding was so scarce for him, he had to edit scenes that would be years apart from each other and make it so that the viewer would not notice that discrepancy. When the editing works well, then you can shoot in different locations, places that are not even in the same area. They're like on the other side of town or different cities. You can place them in the mind of the viewer as though they were in the same area. And I saw that warehouse scene, I thought, wow, these could be two separate locations. When we begin with a Steadicam shot of Joel, and he sits down, and Midge comes and joins him, and she says, this map, this is not in this here where you're trying to find it. I think it begins somewhere else in the factory. Then they leave, and then we get a cut, and then they're somewhere else. That somewhere else may not even be that same setting. They could have shot that in another factory, but in our minds it's going to be continuous, one continuous time and one contiguous space. For all we know, that shot could have taken place the next day. And I love that when something can be done so well, the seams are not apparent. And then the final thought I wanted to point out, I think this is a little interesting. It's the class, the differences of class. They're in the show. Beginning with the first episode where we had the final scene featured Susie going home, and she lives in a shithole Manhattan apartment with a pull-down bed, eating cold beans out of the can because she doesn't have an oven to cook. Beginning with there, we really have had a subtle. It's been subtly in the series the kind of upstairs downstairs aspect, that there are differences, not even between upper middle and lower class, but when Midge went to see the comedian in season 1, between upper middle class and lower upper class, we get. There's a very fine grade between these different classes, the show likes to point out. And I think it gets lost a little bit because of the humor, and also because I think the feminism of the show is a lot more apparent. But the class, the not quite examination, but using the story to bring out the differences of class. It's there, and I like it. So some things I wanted to point out as I began to think about it. We have Susie's in a bottom floor flat where space is at a premium. She doesn't have enough space. Midge is in an uptown penthouse where there may be 2 rooms for every person living in there. The B. Altman women in the basement, they're kind of referred to as not ready for the show, but you look at them, they're beautiful. They've cast them with beautiful extras. Any one of them could be on the floor cosmetics counter if the only thing that would qualify you for the cosmetics counter was your beauty. So Abe mentioned that getting a degree in Russian literature, any degree as a woman, gets you qualified for the B. Alton cosmetics counter, and even then they don't have enough positions for all the women. So I wonder if the women in the basement aren't of a different class, and that's the reason being not ready for the show is code for being the wrong class. Dean Simmons, something about, that's right. So the resolution between, we see that Susie has to address her conflicts on a borrowed phone or on her phone that's no longer in an apartment, it's no longer her apartment, or in a greasy spoon diner. But when Rose and Abe have a conflict, it's resolved in their penthouse or at the university and in the dean's room, where their conversation can be behind closed doors and in strictest confidence. When Rose has to resolve anything, she's in the room with the Ouija family, or she's in the diner where other people are yelling at her, and she has more than one conflict becomes apparent at the same time. The lack of privacy, she doesn't have enough money to be able to afford her own space, so her personal business becomes everyone's business. She's sleeping in the, I can't remember the name of not cafe, it's a Greenwich Village, I guess cafe, yeah, the cafe where she's staying. I can't remember the name of it, but she has to sleep there, and the bartender's pointing out that her things are there. Midge has a phone next to her bed with a very long cord, and Susie has to go into the apartment and out of the Ouija family. Midge watches TV and listens to records. The Italian family, also lower class, They sing, they don't listen to records, they don't have the money for the records, they sing, they make their own TV. They can't even afford to, as far as we know, watch broadcast television. I don't remember seeing a TV in Susie's apartment, maybe it's there, but all these little things point out to the way that the classes are it's the difference in classes is noticed by the show writers and the showrunner. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for joining me. Take care and be well. Joel attempts to keep the finances steady, and Maisel and Roth end up on a treasure hunt. Roth? Is that Joel Roth? What the hell? Who's Roth? Maisel and Roth. That makes no sense. Maisel and Roth. Joel attempts to keep finances steady at Maisel and Roth and ends up on a treasure hunt. Joel's attempts. I did it again. Joel attempts to keep finances steady at Maisel and Roth. I did it again. Midge puts her impeccable planning to the test as she helps Mary with her special day. Oh my God. Oh. Joel's attempts to keep finances steady at Maisel and Roth end up on a treasure hunt. You have no idea how many times it took me to get that sentence. Midge's act flourishes, but Susie's finances take a hit. Back at Columbia, Rose finds herself out of her comfort